returned. So, this is slow but steady. As Kit said, nobody said this was easy.
The British people are not going to tolerate 50,000 people crossing the Channel this year. I'm telling you, they're not going to tolerate
France.
it. I'm hearing it on the doors day in, day out. People are fuming, absolutely
And the reason they're fuming is because you are whipping up anti-migrant hatred
Nonsense.
and saying that they're to blame for all the social problems. You have no idea how angry people are. Let me just tell you, you have to have them.
Another day, another debate that proves only Reform are talking seriously about dealing with illegal immigration. Reform's deputy leader Richard Tice is the only one on this panel who seems serious about this issue. The Labour MP admits they will always obey international law and will never leave the ECHR. In other words, he's admitted they'll never stop the boats. They'll just build them all nice new houses when they arrive instead. Tice was arguing with the Green Party spokeswoman on the panel, who thinks safe and legal routes for basically the entire world is the answer to stopping the boats. Strange, our political party thinks it can simultaneously protect nature and get rid of our borders and import the world. But make no mistake about it, as extreme as the Green Party's views on immigration are, they are not that different to Labour's view. The only difference is Labour expects the illegal immigrants to make their own way to Britain without a safe route. But they have made it clear once they are here, we are the land of milk and honey. That's why they keep coming and the numbers are going up. Reform has emerged as the new party and they are already challenging the top two political parties from campaigning on immigration alone. That shows how big this issue is and how disillusioned the British people are with Labour and the Conservatives. And yet both of them carry on as normal. People aren't stupid. They know none of the mainstream parties will ever be prepared to deal with this issue. So people are now turning to Reform, and watching this, you can see why.
Migrant crossings hit 10,000 so far this year. That's 40% up on the number who arrived by the same time last year. And Keir Starmer has said repeatedly, we can do this. I've smashed terrorist gangs, I'll smash these gangs.
So smash the gangs has barely started. I mean, the key piece of legislation...
Well, no, clearly not.
30,000 later, you've been in charge for 10 months. What are you doing?
Well, it's barely started. The legislation that will introduce the counter-terrorism powers that we've been talking about has not even passed Parliament yet. We've increased enforced returns by 21% in the given period over the last year, and 24,000 have been returned. So, this is slow but steady. As Kit said, nobody said this was easy.
The British people are not going to tolerate 50,000 people crossing the Channel this year. I'm telling you,
crossings from France just by working better with France.
But the thing is, Richard, it's how you stop it. It's how you stop it. Let me just come to Ellie's point about safe routes, just to get a bit of clarity. You'd expand the number of safe routes by,
Absolutely.
I don't know, and how many people, would you take everyone who comes from those countries once you've expanded the safe routes?
Clearly, the UK can't provide asylum to everybody who seeks
so where
it.
would you draw the line?
We've got to recognise that the reason that people seek asylum in the world, and there are tens of millions of people seeking asylum in the world, is because they are fleeing violence, fleeing conflict. We've shown as a country huge generosity.
Conflict in Albania.
As a country, we've shown huge generosity and shown that we can absorb large numbers of people fleeing from Ukraine, for example. Yeah. I want to see a system that's fair, where we're not just saying that if you come from this one country, we'll support you because we're a compassionate country.
Voters might want to know how many more countries would you like to set up a safe route with? Well, let her answer that and then I'll come to you, Richard.
So on the numbers, I actually don't think you can just set a number. We've had governments for years, decades, that have set targets, 10,000, 100,000, whatever.
No, what numbers there? What I mean is how many more countries would you have safe routes with?
We need to have safe routes for anybody who is fleeing under a well-founded fear of persecution, so that they can apply from within that country. So the reason that people are taking boats to come here is because they have to get onto our soil before they can apply.
Let Richard respond.
So they have to endanger themselves hugely to get here, even if they are fleeing horrific violence. We need to have a system that is far more compassionate and fair and accessible to
Richard,
people
what do you say?
where they are fleeing.
Do you think there's support for that?
No, there's no support for that at all. I'm hearing it on the doors, day in, day out. People are fuming, absolutely
And the reason
furious.
they're fuming is because you are whipping up anti-migrant hatred
Nonsense.
and saying that they're to blame for all the social problems.
You have no idea how angry people are. Let me just tell you. You have to have a number, you have to have a target, and then what happens, Ellie, when someone says, when the government says, I'm so sorry, you don't qualify. So if from their legal, safe route, they don't qualify, what are they going to do? They're going to get on the boats and continue to die. And in their dozens.
In those circumstances, it would be much more reasonable to have a policy that is about stopping gangs and so forth. But when people have no alternative whatsoever, no Ukrainians are coming over on boats because they've got other ways of getting here, because we've said we recognise you've got a justified fear and we want to support you.
Would you at least look at that, Richard?
Hang on, I've always supported the Ukrainian scheme.
No, but more safe routes.
Why would we support refugees from one place and not from anywhere else?
But you have to have a number. And interestingly, 20 years ago, we had about an average number of asylum seekers that were accepted in the UK of about 20 to 25,000. And about 20 to 25% of applications were accepted. The rest were returned by a Labour government that was returning some 40,000 every year. That's what we need to get back to.
And these days, it's more like 3/4 of applications are granted because people
because of a woke Home
fleeing.
Office.
No, because people, it's international law that you have to prove you've got a case under.
Well,
because people are fleeing.
All right, but Richard,
funny
what
how
do
it's
you do?
different in European countries where they've got much lower acceptance.
But they still have problems in terms, as they see it, with people coming across.
Huge problems. I mean, Ellie's right. There is a major problem with international immigration. Major problem. You have to have clear, robust, sovereign borders.
Right, but what would you do then about
here.
deporting people where we don't have agreements? We don't have agreement with Afghanistan. We don't have an agreement with Syria because we don't talk to or do deals with those governments. And a large number of those people come from those countries.
In a very small number of nations, you're going to have an arrangement with a third nation. The Conservative government thought Rwanda was the answer.
We saw how well that worked.
I never thought that would work. You might be looking at something like the Ascension Islands or others, but you cannot accept. This is going to get far worse unless we change course. And I've asked the Home Secretary time and again, how long do you try this ludicrous policy of smashing the gangs before you accept? It's not working. You've got to adopt the reform policy. Pick up and safely take back. We know it works. It worked in Australia with a variation. And until we do that...
So you don't know it would work here?
We do know it would work because a variant
without
of
the
it,
agreement of the French?
Well, we say to the French very clearly, you've got this international obligation, and if you don't pick up the boats, we will, and we will take them back.
Right.
And guess what? Within 3 or 4 weeks,
let me just come over to this side. They've been very quiet, actually.
This is a problem, as we all know, many, many years in the making. 4 Conservative manifestos promised to bring down immigration numbers and failed.
Hang on, this is illegal we're talking about, not legal.
And the smashing the gangs has barely begun, as I said. The counter-terrorism powers that will be introduced by the new bill that's going through Parliament at the moment will begin to impact that. For 6 or 7 years, these gangs have been operating essentially with impunity. We've got to start tackling them. These are the criminals here. These are the people smugglers, and these are the people that we've got to take on.
Right. I mean, Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, is also looking at reviewing the framework, I think she uses the term, for a right to a family life from people seeking asylum. Will that work while remaining a member of the European Convention on Human Rights?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. You'd have to ask a lawyer.
Right. Do you think it will work?
I think the review is the right thing to do. There are some egregious cases that have come up in the court system where people have seemed to have abused that particular article within the ECHR, but the government's committed to the ECHR.
Right. It says, yes, we will continue to comply with international law.
But this is why the review is going on.
So, well, everyone seems confident that it will comply with international law, Richard.
Well, I think we should leave the ECHR. Essentially, it's a politically biased court. It's part of the whole European Union set up that the British people voted to leave. And I think if you had a referendum on the ECHR, I'm absolutely certain...
And there are other parts of your party who would agree with that?
I think there are, yeah. Probably. I think there's definitely been a general frustration with the ECHR of the last... But it's not just in the UK. That's across the board in all sorts of countries. And so I do think there is a case to talk to our allies in the European Convention about what reforms we could bring to the court.
Right.
It has become, in some cases, too exploratory, and lots of countries think that way. And so, for me, rather than leave, I think we should try reform.
Right. Do you agree with that? Reform? Is there a reform to be made in terms of the right to a family life or not?
The right to a family life is a fundamental human right. and human rights are, by definition, universal. We have a proud tradition in the UK as British people of standing up for, leading the charge on expanding human rights in many ways. And I just think so many people in this country would be so saddened to see this country move in a direction that's about shutting lots of people out of access to the full human rights. Where there are complex cases, courts are the right place to